All right, so today we're going to be talking about absolute value. So when you see absolute value, it's either going to be in words or it's going to use these little field goals, is what I call them, around a number. And what absolute value is, so we're going to go ahead and fill in absolute value. Absolute value is the distance between a number and 0. So that's what absolute value is. It's just a distance between a number and 0. So one thing that I want you to remember is that distance can never be negative. The reason why this is important is because it helps us always solve our answers here when it comes to absolute value. You cannot measure distance backwards. So when we go down here, it says that -2, so we're going to be looking at this -2, and it says -2 is blank spaces from blank. So we're always measuring from 0, so that means that it is 2 spaces from 0. So that's 1, 2, because remember, we're looking at that 0 line as our main spot. And then it also says 2 is also blank spaces from 0. So if we look at that one, we would see that 2 is 2 spaces away from 0 as well. So both -2 and 2 have the same absolute value. So they are both 2 spaces away or 2 numbers away in distance from 0. So one thing that I want you to always remember is that absolute value is always positive, unless the negative is on the outside of the absolute value. This is pretty uncommon, so we don't see this very often, and I'll show you some examples over here where we say give it a try. So let's go ahead and give this a try. So the first one we have is the absolute value of, so this is how you say the absolute value of -7. The distance away from 0 would be 7. The next one says the absolute value of 5. That would just be the number 5 because it's a distance of 5 away from 0. So for all of these numbers, what we're doing is we are simply just taking the number inside and getting rid of the negative if it's in there. So your answer just becomes the positive version of the number that's in there. If it's already positive, then it stays the same number because the distance is still positive. So I'm going to keep going through these. The absolute value of -8 would be 8. The absolute value of 999 is 999. And now this is what I was talking about when it comes to the negative on the outside of the absolute value. So the way you would read this is the negative absolute value of 8. So the negative isn't inside the absolute value signs. So that means that the negative stays there. And the absolute value of 8 is 8. Same thing over here for the negative absolute value of 87. It would be -87 because that negative isn't involved in the absolute value. On our final one, it's the absolute value of -654. So we would say that that is 654 is the distance from 0.